Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Global Maritime Forum, Digital Transformation of Maritime and Ports, brought to you by Port Technology International and supported by Crimson Logic. We have an excellent program lined up for you with two of the most forward-thinking minds and leaders in the industry, Amos Wangora, CEO of Kentrade, and Warsama Gurea, CEO of the Djibouti Port Community Systems. The two will share their ideas as well as the successes they have encountered as they strive to help developing nations in the African region build a resilient and thriving maritime sector through the use of technology. Following the presentations from the two, we will be joined by a specialist panel for further discussion. Joining our panel will be two experts from Crimson Logic, Solomon Raj Joseph and Champhuk Singh, as well as Nainan Baiju from the World Bank. During the panel session, we will discuss a range of actions and strategies that are needed from both governments and private sector communities to maximise the benefits of digitalisation in maritime trade and to build an innovative ecosystem and encourage collaboration. Now, before I hand over to our first presenter, a few bits of housekeeping. We will be seeing our two presentations first with a short 5-minute break in between. During this break, please feel free to use the chat function to speak with our speakers and other audience members. Following the presentations, there will be another short break for everyone before we begin the live debate session. During the breaks, you do not need to leave the platform. The latest we will finish will be 12 noon UK time. Also, please do engage with us via the chat function on the right-hand side. And if you have any questions for our presenters or panelists, please submit them via the questions tab. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Amos Wangora. Amos, please share your presentation and we will begin.
Thank you, Beth. You can see the presentation? So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Beth, for having me. I'll be presenting on the Kenyan Maritime Single Window System, which is part of our larger implementation of the single window in Kenya. Let me first start by introducing Kentrade. Kentrade is a state agency established in January of 2011. And we were principally set up to facilitate international trade and to implement, operationalize, and manage the Kenya Electronic Single Window System. Some background on the port before the single window system. Of course, the thinking then had been that coming up with a single window would allow us address quite a number of challenges that we previously had at the port, where we had quite a discordant environment, lengthy and costly processes, poor controls, and regulatory agency, regulatory requirements for particular government agencies easily circumvented. Of course, largely lack of transparency and uncoordinated interventions by the government agencies, obviously then further impacting and delaying the clearance process. And of course, overall, an inefficient cargo documentation system. So of course, then Kenya adopted that we need to implement a single window in the country. The single window that we have implemented is based on the UN CFAC recommendation, which allows parties involved in trade and transport to lodge standardized documentation and integrate with the government agencies on one side, and and have the requirements of the citizen built in on the other side. With the objective of improving service delivery to customers by reducing cargo clearance time, facilitating electronic transaction of stakeholders as they are involved in import and export business, reducing paper transactions, and of course then adopting a much more open transaction processing system. So in summary then, Kenya, the single window system in Kenya is the Kenya TradeNet system. This has been implemented by Crimson Logic of Singapore and has been operating since October 31st of 2013. That is actually the date that the system went live. So about 8 years of operation. We have been upgrading the system into what we now call the Trade Facilitation Platform. This was based on a drive towards avoiding technological obsolescence. And of course, then having an opportunity to do a technology refresh. So we went live actually on August 20th and are in the process then of migrating all the government agencies and the users from the old platform to the new platform. Obviously, we want to leverage on new technology, lower the enhancement costs, also lower the overall support costs. It allows much more, it builds capacity within Kentrade to be able to support the system ourselves. And of course, as I've said, leveraging on much newer technology. In terms of the impact of the single window system to date, we have seen continued increase in adoption and usage of the system by government to issue permits. Of course, this was one of the principal objectives. I mean, you can see from that chart, the numbers growing from 2014, with a high in 2019. COVID has impacted the numbers in 2020. Overall, over 3.3 million permits have been processed and approved through the single window system since we went live. About 800 permits are configured for the various government agencies in the system. In terms of improvements in time taken to approve the permits, that has continued to improve. For export permits, this has reduced from about 4.1 days to about 4.1 days from about 4.4. This is data for as of June of this year, 2021. Imports also, time has improved from about 6.3 days to about 4.2 days. And this keeps improving. We have seen improved compliance, revenue collection, and traceability. Of course, the single window provides quite a structured approach to compliance, leading to an increase in compliance itself. Government agencies are able to see much more compliance in terms of the documentation, which has ensured then also correct revenue yield. We talk about that $4 million US dollars collected through the system for government agencies over the period. In terms of automation, then again, this has continued to improve. We have seen, whether it's in terms of the number of cargo clearance, automation of cargo clearance processes, which offer visibility of both imports and exports over the period again. Faster trending clearance and release of cargo also at the entry points. Obviously driven by a much more secure repository, availability of electronic documentation. We have brought in now what is called the cargo release module, which facilitates then clearance at the entry points, and have gradually seen then automation growing from an initial about 14% when we were implementing the single window to about 80% now at the ports of entry. Of course, then based, and as we continue to implement new products, then that automation level continues to increase. In terms of the single window system, this is a new product that we have rolled out in early July. We actually went live in June. It's an online portal used by shipping lines and ship agents to prepare and submit pre-arrival and pre-departure declarations. It ties the project itself entailed implementing an e-maritime module on the single window system. The decision was made in Kenya that rather than implement a separate system, that we use the trade, we enhance the trade single window to then implement an e-maritime module. Now, the users of this are largely the shipping agents and shipping lines who operate in Kenya, and of course then the government agencies that regulate ship and passenger clearance. It essentially allows shipping agents in Kenya to electronically prepare and submit vessel pre-arrival and pre-departure declarations. Quite a number of agencies, the Maritime Authority, Revenue Authority, Port Authority, Immigration, Port Health, and of course then other relevant government agencies who operate at the ports. This is based on the IMO FAL Convention. The IMO in 2014 obligated member countries to implement maritime single window systems, essentially just to make sure that we standardize the requirements for documentation to ports. So this is what we have been able to implement. There's quite a host of benefits that are expected out of this. Of course, much faster port clearance for vessels, electronic documentation, much more secure repositories out of these products. Now, the key functions of the electronic maritime single window has been to automate mandatory file forms. IMO came up with specific templates which member countries then should implement. We have implemented all the 7 mandatory file forms and have also then gone beyond that and also implemented several others, for example, the firearms declaration. So the file forms implemented on our maritime single window include the general declaration, cargo declaration, ship stores declaration, cruise effects, cruise list, passenger lists, the dangerous goods manifest, last ports of call. We've also implemented the waste declaration form with the MAPOL appendices, and of course, as mentioned, the firearm declaration and ship certificates. The project commenced in January of 2020, has been again also developed by Crimson Logic. Of course, we suffered a few delays because of COVID. COVID hit at around the same time. We managed to test the system virtually. That was quite significant because we were moving all our project teams to virtual platforms. Obviously, because they could not meet physically and test the system. So that took time to put together, but the user acceptance tests were eventually done in June and July. Then we, of course, then moved into training, managed to virtually train about 150 shipping stakeholders, mainly drawn from the government agencies who would be the approvers, and also the shipping lines and shipping agents who would be lodging the documents. So we did a pilot of the system and eventually went live in June of 2021. Of course, then the biggest challenge has been, working in that COVID environment, migrating all this to a paperless environment. But of course, then there was also pressure from the port itself and port stakeholders to be able to adopt this new platform. Some of the challenges that we came across in the course of implementing the maritime single window, a significant one has been conflicting government mandates between customs, the Port Authority, the Maritime Authority, Port State Control, mainly because each of these bodies use different legal framework. For example, our customs operate under the East African Customs Management Act, and of course then the WCO, while Port State Control and Port Authority are largely bound by the IMO FAL obligations. Obviously, these come with different priorities. One example is that the booking process. The customs had already an elaborate process for shipboarding and booking. Now, but IMO, one of the mandatory forms then comes in, is a requirement to use the standard IMO file template. So of course then having that discussion and for customs then to agree that we build an integration and we use one single platform has been one of the challenges that we have come across. Of course, then administrative delays by government agencies as we push them into adopting the new way of working and getting rid of the manual documents, informed largely by different levels of ICT maturity. Some of them lack resources. We had to go a further step, actually, in even acquiring equipment for some of the government agencies. Basics such as Wi-Fi also being a challenge. Of course, then the cost of ICT system implementation and moving forward the maintenance of these platforms. Of course, in terms of digitalization, then embracing innovation and digitalization is key to improving performance at the ports. So the MSW, the Maritime Single Window, will be essential in tracking monetary compliance, of course, through information related to pre-arrival and pre-departure. Will allow then, it will facilitate vessel tracking, and of course then planning for port clearance. The port is able to do projections based on this information. The port security and shipboarding processes, normally they undergo ISPS audits. The challenge has been lack of information then for those audits. But of course then with the single window, with the Maritime Single Window, then a lot of that information is available at the click of a button. Of course, provision of much more detailed and accurate information from vessels and from shipping lines, making sure then, as I mentioned, there's much more information for compliance monitoring. And of course, then building integrations with the relevant port or custom systems so that then we avoid duplications of processes. I mentioned the numerous benefits both to shipping and logistics stakeholders and also to government. I'll not repeat that in terms of whether availability of information for different processes, for audit, for compliance, is now available. In terms of recommendations and based on what we have been able to achieve, I think there's need for enhanced collaboration on maritime trade facilitation. And of course then through a collaborative approach in automation of ship-to-shore business processes, aligning all the business processes of the various numerous government agencies that operate at the ports. Now, agencies also need to advocate for a paperless environment, look at seamless integration. If there are existing trade single windows like the Kenyan case, then enhancing this rather than implementing entirely new platforms, which come in again with challenges of interoperability. Of course, simplifying processes, re-engineering processes as they are implemented is necessary. We cut out a lot of the processes, redundant processes, which were there in the manual process. And of course, then facilitation of, for example, payment, integrating with payment gateways to facilitate the payment leg. And of course, then making sure that national file committees are in place and are leading these implementations. So it makes it much more easier to harmonize processes, even from a national or regional perspective. And of course, then engaging even at region-wide forums to make sure then that processes or procedures are aligned. So this is what we are gearing to. The Maritime Single Window then becomes a subset of the larger single window platform in the country. We also are looking at putting in place a logistics marketplace, which also then provides service linkages for the various players within the industry, which then has full integrations with the custom systems and the port systems, and then making sure that that ecosystem is providing data, which then can be used for projections, for analytics, just enhancing the way that the whole port ecosystem works together. So yes, indeed, we have seen significant achievement for our ports in Kenya, but of course there's work that continues to be done to enhance these systems so that they can serve the port community much better. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for that, Amos. A really great start to our session today. Just to give everyone a chance to catch up on the chat function and to take note of what Amos's presentation discussed, we are going to head to a quick break. So it's 22 minutes past the hour now. We will be back with Wosama's presentation at 25 minutes past the hour. So please facilitate the chat function, ask your questions in the questions tab, and we'll see you in 3 minutes for the next presentation. Well, I hope you found that time useful. I can see there's some questions coming in already for the chat, and someone has asked if they're able to ask questions to the speakers. Please put all your questions in the questions tab on the right-hand side, and we will be able to get to as many of those as we can during the panel discussion. We have plenty of time for discussion at the end of this session. So I'd like to say thank you again to Amos for an excellent presentation, and now introduce our next presenter, Wosama, who is from the Djibouti Port Community System. So Warsama, please go ahead and enter and share your presentation. And just make sure you're not on mute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Beth. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. So I'll start the presentation. Okay, my name is Warsama from Djibouti Port Community System. We recently set up a port community system in 2018. So I'll go through first by presenting DPCS, Djibouti Port Community System. So as Djibouti has been investing in a lot of ports and free zone infrastructures for the past 9 years, it became quickly apparent that we needed some type of digital single window for the documentation side to help basically deliver the containers faster. So it has been set up to digitalize different processes linked to import and exporting the ports, airports, rail, and corridors. We aim to leverage technology to simplify, connect, and streamline those processes. So quick background information about Djibouti, and this will explain our implementation choices in terms of PCS or Maritime Single Window. So we are a small country on the Horn of Africa. Our population is 960,000. We have a service-based economy, mostly maritime and logistics services. We handle 90% of our neighboring Ethiopian import and export. We have set up 5 different ports specialized in general cargo, bulk, container terminal, multi-purpose, and salt export. And we have also been investing in free trade zones for general trading, industrial, and energy services and products. So this gives you an idea about the type of road connections that we have with our neighboring country. So we have 3 road corridors going to different parts of Ethiopia, and this also gives you a general idea of the road infrastructures in the Horn of Africa. So this is also the road connections we have with neighboring Ethiopia. We have the Djibouti to Addis Ababa rail completed, and there is a project to go further as well and to start constructions all the way to South Sudan. And this is an agreement between Ethiopia and South Sudan. So the idea is to have our ports serving the landlocked countries like Ethiopia and South Sudan. So this is the type of structure that we have. So we have Djibouti Ports and Free Zone Authority, basically driving the whole strategy of transforming Djibouti into an international maritime center, and also a trade and logistics hub in the region. So Djibouti Ports and Free Zone Authority is goes directly under the presidency of Djibouti, and it owns through Great Horn Investment Holding different companies like ports, infrastructures, free zone infrastructures, Air Djibouti, Djibouti Shipping Company, Red Sea Bunkering that provides fuel bunkering services to the high seas to other liners. Djibouti Ship Repair Yard is basically under constructions right now. So as you have here, you have the whole strategy of Djibouti and all these companies being sister companies working together to achieve this vision of transforming Djibouti into international maritime center. So as you know, also can see Djibouti Ports, Djibouti Port Community System is part of that. And also we have the road corridor that directly comes under Djibouti Ports and Free Zone Authority. And this has helped us to implement strategies faster, since the ports and roads are connected. And since that we are also serving 90% of the import and export of Ethiopia, it makes sense to have all these different entities under one regulating body. So these are the stakeholders of Djibouti Port Community System. Aim to have customs, port authority, RC port operators, freight forwarders, shipping agents, and free zone importers and exporters that contribute a lot to the trading community in Djibouti, and we also have the banks. So these are the features we have implemented, which is you have vessel management for the registrations of the vessel. Whereas before you had to submit all the different documentation about the vessel certificates to 2 or 3 different entities. You can only submit it once at this point. You have arrival and departure management, the maritime single window, all the documentation about the arrival and the departure of the vessel. The 7 file forms recommended by the IMO file committee. You have the cargo management features like manifest submission, amendments, delivery order, and all different functionalities relating to the cargo. And you have custom integration, because this was very important for us to basically be able to clear the cargo through one single platform. And you have e-gate appointments for the customers to print their own gate passes and go to the ports and collect their cargo. And you have transit corridor services. In order to use the road corridors, the drivers or the truckers have to have some type of pass permit once they're loaded, and they need to get this permit in order to be able to progress to their destinations in neighboring countries. So they can buy online these passes and basically go straight to the borders. And you have the integrated online payments connected with currently 5 different banks that have the accounts of the 100% of shipping agents and forwarders in Djibouti. We have also set up integrated port community payment card that customers that do not wish to have an account can just top up and just pay in different places or payment, finalize the payments to the ports and port authority and different entities. So we identify the services based on who basically it concerns. This is maritime single window services, from vessel registration, arrival and departure declarations, the 7 IMO file forms, or any other port services requests like berth, mooring, tag request, submitting of documentation like loading and unloading lists, bay plan, parking list, nomination of second carrier. All these documentation can be submitted online through the port community system. On your right hand side, you can see some type of dashboard or dashboards that are available for our customers. We're able to follow up on the performance of the ports in responding to their requests, basically. They can follow also any information on the operations on their vessels, any unloading time or discharge time, loading time. All these different performance reports can be seen on their own dashboards. They're also able to follow up on their own performances. For example, if their agents are submitting the required documentation on time or not, because that contributes to a lot of delays on the arrival of the vessel. If the documentation is not submitted on time, it can lead to fines and all different problems. So they can also follow up the performance of their own agents. So this is the clearance services or freight forwarding services from the electronic delivery order, port fees invoice, request for port fees, gate in, gate out, stuffing reports, all these different services, the booking of the slots from the container terminal or the general cargo terminal. And they print also, or they can also print their own pre-gates and just pass it to the driver to go to the port premises and for the delivery of the containers. We have finalized the integration when it comes to customs for manifest integration and also any amendments on these on the manifests and on the BLs, and also the delivery order has been integrated with customs. We are currently finalizing the declaration integration, transit declaration, and local import declarations as well. And there is also the corridor road pass I was talking about earlier. Customer can basically purchase their corridor road pass from the system and print it and just go about their own business. These are the free zone services because they were using a lot of the port services online, custom services, but they also requested us to add their administrative services in terms of company registration, visa request, exoneration, customs, renewal of license, and free zone gate passes. So since we are a small country, our local imports and exports represent 20% to 25% of the traffic that is incoming into Djibouti ports. The rest is traffic that is going to the neighboring countries. So as you can imagine, tracking the goods throughout the ports and the corridors of Djibouti is very important because the cargo owner is not within the country. So as all the shipping agents and the forwarders are using the system is recording the documentation processes, different documentation processes, and also the operational processes of the ports. For example, the customer will be able to follow the submission of the documentation of the container, just as they can follow the discharge time of the container, the gate in, gate out time, the time the driver has purchased the corridor tickets, the time the driver has passed through different checkpoints in the corridor, and they can follow the progression of the tracks within the corridor. We have fully integrated the corridor and are currently working on integrating the train, rail company. You can already follow the cargo that is loaded and discharged from rail. Any container that comes from Djibouti ports can be tracked until the loading into the train. But what we want to integrate with the rail companies, the progression of the train until it arrives at its destination in Ethiopia, for example. So here we have the difference that we have managed to, or the improvements we have managed to achieve between the manual process and the online process of the, for example, cargo delivery. And we have managed to decrease the number of processes from 9 to only 5. And when it comes to time, the manual process used to take around 24 hours for the transit operation. But now it only takes 1.5 hours, a maximum of 2 hours to complete all the documentation. But we aim to achieve 1 hour, what you call it, target for the completion of the documentation. So this is to give you an idea about the different areas or office locations that the typical customer, typical forwarder or cargo owner can travel to every single day. So you have the documentation office, and you have to go to customs office and ports invoicing offices. If you visit, like for example, to give you an idea, you have to go to the ports, request the quotation, go back, prepare the check, pay the invoicing, the invoices of the port, then go to customs, finalize the transit declaration, comes back to also to the port for the finalization of the booking of the container delivery. So this is what we want to avoid, and just by digitalizing the services, and removing the fact that the customers are going back and forth in different offices, managed to achieve 80% a decrease in the time it used to take. So you have here different documents that can be printed from the system. You have the port clearance certificate for the vessel to leave our territorial waters. They need the port clearance, obviously. And the issue with the port clearance before was that it was manual, and the shipping agents used to go to the harbor master's office and to get him to sign the port clearance certificate. But now we managed to digitalize that, and they can print it from the system itself and send it to the vessel master. And the other issue was that if the port clearance was not provided on time before, during the manual, when they used to use the manual process, and the berth was busy, the port used to request the vessel to wait at anchorage for the delivery of the port clearance certificate. And shipping agents had to basically hire a tugboat to go all the way to the vessel master and basically give it to the vessel masters by hand for the vessel to leave the shore. So they managed to save time. They also managed to save around $450 for the hiring of the tugboat. You have also the corridor road pass. They can print it. So the connection between intermodal connection between the maritime ports and the roads can be easily facilitated. Hey, just to give you an idea about what the customers in Ethiopia can or neighboring countries can see when they look at particular gate in, gate out transactions. So they can see all the information, even the weight of the cargo. For example, this particular cargo is a wheat cargo in destination to Ethiopia. They can check all the information about the particular transaction that happened. So since the customer is in another country, what happens is that what used to happen a lot is that the driver or the transport that was commissioned to bring in the cargo, when they come into Djibouti, they used to do some jobs on the side. But now the customers in Ethiopia or neighboring country can see what their truck is doing in Djibouti. If they see the truck is transporting a different type of cargo or different cargo for another customers, they're able to push and say, okay, guys, we can see that you're not doing our job. Please get back to it. Otherwise, it's a breach of contract. So this visibility, this transparency helps to improve our port community efficiency. Because what used to happen was that the driver or the trucker they're doing jobs on the side, like the example I've provided, they used to complain about the ports or customs and say, okay, guys, we are having issues with the ports and our container is not being delivered, whereas they're working on another assignment. So this transparency provides an indirect way to influence the cargo owner to push their own drivers or truckers to be more efficient and to deliver the cargo fast. So this is another example of container gate tracking. So container number, truck entered yard, exited yard, all this information can be seen by the final cargo owner or final importer. So there's also a request that came from our customers in Ethiopia is to record empty truck arrivals, because not only the gating gate out, but they requested to have this information because they need to know whenever the truck reaches Djibouti and is ready to start their the business or the pickup of the cargo. Because some of the trucks, like I've said, they start doing jobs on the side, or they stay in different hotels in different areas of Djibouti instead of going straight to the port and picking up the cargo. So this information, we have different checkpoints in the corridor where the arrival of empty trucks is being recorded. So whenever the customer sees that the empty truck has reached Djibouti, they just pick up the phone and say, guys, I can see you there. They can say, okay, I can see you are in Djibouti, and you're ready to do the job, and I can still I'm not seeing you going to the port. So they can push them harder to finalize the process. So the tracking is done by the DPCR, the Djibouti Port Corridor Road, is the agency, corridor agency in charge of corridors in Djibouti. So they have, as you can see, Djibouti is a small country. Corridor up to all the way to Ethiopia is only 220 kilometers. So, and since internet is very, very expensive in Djibouti, and also trackers are not willing to use GPS, we have different checkpoints where the corridor road pass is being scanned, and the customer can see where they're at within the corridor at some given time. So the advantages we have seen in the implementation of these type of systems, obviously the first one is the single submission facility. Also the berth allocation response time reduced from 72 hours to 1 hour, because we have a new regulation enforced by Djibouti Ports and Fisheries Authority requesting, asking all the ports to imperatively respond to all requests through the system within 1 hour. So ports, we talked about e-port clearance, electronic port clearance as well. So they were able to save 5 hours and up to $650 for the 10 ports. The forwarders port documentation process also was reduced from around 7 to 8 hours it used to take before then to an average of 67 minutes. We also got better visibility of documentation process for logistics community. So there is more transparency on approval times of the authorities. You can see if there is any delays in providing certain approval, and just take the case to the regulator, Djibouti Ports and Fisheries Authority. And we, as DPCS, provide all the proofs and times also if there is any case or litigation between forwarders, cargo owners, ports, and everything. And we have also been able to experience better tracking of cargo trucks in the transit corridor. And we have been able to provide increased visibility for the importers and exporters in Ethiopia of the logistics providers' activity in Djibouti. So they will be able to follow their logistics provider in Djibouti for any document submission times and approval times from the authority. So these are also the support services we provide for the customers and users. So if they need a certain notification, a particular notification is about a different type of shipments, we're able to provide that by email or SMS. There's a dedicated help desk for our user. If the users need to reset their passwords, or they're not able to, or they don't know how to finalize our particular operations. In terms of tracking capabilities, if they want to track a particular cargo and they have not been paying attention in the training sessions, we are able to also provide some guidance on that. And also we provide integration for the big companies like big liners. If they need to exchange information, instead of logging into DPCS and submitting the for example, loading list and loading list, if they're able to do it from their own systems, we have the capabilities to integrate with them and basically get this information automatically. Configuration, so basically this is to do with the dashboards. If they require a dashboard or particular set of dashboards to follow some performances, whether the performance of the ports, the performance of authorities in approving particular requests, the submission of their own requests, all of that, we're able to set it up for them as well. So that's it for the presentation. Thank you for listening. I hope to get your questions as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Osama, for that presentation about the Djibouti port community system, and really insightful example of real success in such a small nation as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. What we're going to do now is we are going to head to another short break. We will be back again on the hour. So you've just got just over 5 minutes to continue the discussion in the chat, as well as posing your questions to the speakers. We will also be joined by 2 members of the Crimson Logic team, Solomon Raj Joseph and Cheng Fuk Seng, as well as Nainan Biju from the World Bank. So also prepare your questions for those guys. But thank you so much again for joining us, and we will be back very shortly.
Moving goods from one point of the world to another requires interaction with and reliance on both commercial and government stakeholders. Goods go through a 5-step journey. Throughout this process, goods are handled by multiple commercial parties who provide logistics, compliance, and financing services to ensure they reach destinations without a hitch. This is where GETS comes in, to power global trade connectivity, making it more accessible, predictable, and easier to fulfill. On the other end of the spectrum, government agencies are involved in trade facilitation, regulatory enforcement, and oversight at both the origin and destination borders. This is where our trade facilitation platform takes center stage. empowering governments with a full range of capabilities to manage these processes. The interests and priorities between governments and businesses in the trade space are starting to converge in 3 key areas. Control. To ensure governance and manage risk, there's a need for increased visibility. Businesses which share relevant information with governments go through less red tape, resulting in faster clearances and lower cross-border tariffs. Connectivity. For trade ecosystems to run and operate seamlessly, connectivity is key. This entails collaboration with multiple stakeholders which enable the creation of more effective trade processes. Competitiveness. With enhancements in control and connectivity, productivity and efficiency is increased. Businesses become more profitable, and governments become more attractive partners, giving them a competitive edge in the global trade ecosystem. As the interests, priorities, and needs of governments and businesses converge, the concept of a synergistic total trade proposition is a compelling one. Together as a group, Crimson Logic and GETS bring to you the Total Trade Platform.
Well, thank you for that short break and that excellent video from Crimson Logic. There's so many questions coming in. We've got 1 hour for discussion. So I'd like to invite all of our speakers and the panelists to join me, and we will begin with our discussion. Hi, Nainan. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, Bert.
As well, thank you. Amos, lovely to see you again. You've been very active on the questions, so some of my questions that have come through I might not need to ask. And Wassama, thank you again. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. I wanted to start off, before we start talking about the presentations and the case studies that you guys have provided and how Crimson Logic is working with you guys. I wanted to start with Nainan and kind of what the World Bank is talking about when it's looking at digitalization of ports. We've seen some excellent case studies from our friends Amos and Wangora. So Nainan, in terms of the perspective of the World Bank, what is your view on digitalization and some of the efforts that are being made today in the African region in particular?
Many thanks, Beth. I hope you can hear me.
Yep, can hear you fine.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure to be part of this forum on digital transformation of maritime and ports in particular. And thanks for the insightful presentations from Amos and Wangora. And it's great to see these developments in the African continent. The World Bank, together with the IAPH, has come out with a report last year proposing a roadmap towards improving digitalization of the maritime logistics chain. And I see many of these components being implemented in these two countries. So the report primarily outlines short, medium-term measures ports can take to accelerate digitalization and strengthen resilience in the long term. So, in particular, in the short term, it advocates measures. For example, in a crisis situation like a pandemic, how deploying smart technologies could improve immediate digital health security between ship and shore personnel. And also the report has highlighted in the medium term, immediate digital adoption of the IMO FAL requirements and in due course to a port community system. So I could see from the presentations, these are being implemented in many parts of the region. And yes.
Yes, so obviously we can see that there's things like that being already implemented. And you mentioned the report that you released earlier this year. But the report also found that there is a risk of a digital divide between some of the ports that have developed digitally, and obviously with the FAL requirements as well, and those who have not. So obviously outside of these excellent examples of ports and establishments that are doing the right thing, what more is there to be done, and how can they kind of learn lessons perhaps from what we've seen today?
Thanks. So while the World Bank IAPH report charts the roadmap, IAPH has led a survey of over 100 of the world ports that revealed some interesting findings and identified some of these biggest barriers to successful data interchange and adopting FAL requirements in some of these countries, as you mentioned. It's not financing or neither information technology. It is the willingness of multiple port stakeholders to collaborate. I think this was also mentioned in the presentations that how they got the implementation of all this digitalization through collaborative efforts with the port community. And the second point is a need to implement a legal framework governing and ensuring accurate and robust data exchange. Now, when in the survey, it's interesting to look at the findings of the survey. A third of the ports surveyed are yet to commence digitalizing according to the IMO FAL requirements. I think the two countries that represented are exceptions. Another 30% of the countries are developing digitalization, and only the remaining third have systems operational. So it's quite a long way to go. And some of these countries could struggle to implement, for example, a legal framework governing and ensuring this accurate and robust data exchange. And lessons learned from our study and the survey of IAPHR, probably 5 lessons which we can point out. Number one, engaging, as I mentioned, all stakeholders, the collaboration in the process from day one when you embark on this drive. Embedding clear data governance, that's very important to build that trust. And the third would be data orchestration, namely the automation of data-driven processes. I think that was again mentioned in the presentations. You need to automate the or digitize the processes from end to end. And if, of course, then we will come to change management, etc., the political will, etc., later on. And again, sustainably funded solution. There should be adequate finance available to ensure that these countries have are able to implement this roadmap towards digitalization.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's a really good entrance into our discussion today and kind of hits on a lot of the points that I've kind of prepared that we'll be talking about, especially when it comes to collaboration. I know someone in the questions chat already asked Amos about how did you start the collaboration process, and obviously also the change management as well is something we're going to touch on. But now turning to our partners at Crimson Logic and focusing first on the Kentrade presentation. Solomon, I understand that Crimson Logic and Kentrade have had like quite a long-lasting relationship and you've been on this journey together for quite a while. Are you able to kind of talk to me about what's going on in the future and how Crimson Logic is looking to play a role in the future digital transformation journey? And just unmute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was on mute. Thanks, Beth. Thank you, Amos and Varsama. It was a very nice presentation. Yes, Beth, both Crimson Logic and Kentrade, we have come a very long way in this journey to enable trade facilitation in Kenya. Crimson Logic has always been a partner to Kentrade. We were advising them on new developments, new initiatives, and other best practices modeled on the Singapore trade ecosystem. In fact, we started off this journey on a B2B, on a G2G kind of arrangement. Since then, we started off digitizing the regulatory compliance, which actually is the single electronic window, onboarding more than 25 government agencies and providing traders in Kenya with a one-stop platform to simplify trade compliance. This was started way back in 2016. And since then, the system has been actively used. We are also ensuring that Kenya gets the best and is keeping up to the latest and the new technologies. So recently, we have upgraded the single window to our latest TFT platform, which Amos also mentioned during his presentation. Once this is done, then we are looking at extending the ecosystem, the community, the trade ecosystem beyond the regulators and facilitating the trade ecosystem with B2B value-added services through our Callista offering. B2B service is also crucial to the end-to-end supply chain. Ninan also mentioned about the end-to-end process, which is very important to streamline all the process in the supply chain. So the B2B component also plays a critical role. Amos also mentioned about this in his presentation. This is also in line with UN Recommendation 36 for the single window implementation on the interoperability and the data exchange between the government to government and government to business. So this recommendation dwells on extending the connectivity beyond the single window. So this is what we will be embarking with Kentrade in the near future. So this will definitely enable the business community in Kenya to be more integrated with the global community, providing them connectivity, improving their efficiency, and foster easier and more predictable trade, and thus bringing down the cost of trade. So we always look forward to working with Kentrade and are strengthening our relationship with Kentrade. Thank you, Beth.
Amos, did you have anything to add to that, kind of looking to the future?
Yes, we have had good partners in Crimson Logic, and of course a lot of learnings from the Singapore experience, and I think we continue to do that, and of course then we look forward to, and I think that's the next natural step, looking at value addition around that single window ecosystem that has been achieved. But I think Solomon has covered it very well. Let me not repeat what he has said.
Thank you. Obviously, speaking of the Singapore experience as well, Singapore is one of the most well-known maritime hubs. It's well known for being a digital leader as well. Phúc Seng, from the perspective of the Republic of Kenya and other African nations, what do you think that they can learn from the Singaporean kind of know-how, and how can they leverage that, especially with yourselves at Crimson Logic? If you can unmute.
Yeah, yes. Okay, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I think implementing the maritime single window for Kenya lays the foundation for a lot more steps to be taken along the digital transformation journey. I think the whole transformation of the maritime and port operations and activities is actually a long journey before we achieve what we call the best practices and the best models in operations. So I think for Kenya, I think it has laid a very strong foundation in that sense that it started with the single electronic window for the trade compliance, which is very important for the import and export of and consumption of goods. And then it has moved on to the maritime single window. This is very important for vessels calling at the port. So we know that when the ship calls at the port, there is a host of port call activities. And the IMO FAL Convention has actually mandated that there are minimum 7 or 9 documents to be digitalized. So I think Kentrade has taken this step forward to implement the maritime single window. But as I said, it's quite a long journey ahead. So we have great plans for Kenya because by implementing the single window, we are just digitalizing the documents. So what do we do with the data that we have captured and consolidated in the database is of great value. So I think the next step, we can move on to things like the data analytics in the using the data that's captured in the maritime single window. And at the same time, I think we can look at areas where we can move towards the just-in-time operations and coordinated operations. Because when the ship calls at the port, there are many activities and many stakeholders involved. When it comes in, you need a pilot, you need tugs, you may be taking water, you may be taking bunkers, ship supplies, and it may also be disposing waste and so forth. So in an uncoordinated situation, sometimes these service providers, they come at the same time, and the services, they are stuck somewhere because somebody is providing some service, or some agencies are, doing something on board the ship, such as inspection, things like that. So some of these service providers may have to wait, and there's a lot of wastage and unproductive time. So in the next step moving forward, we can work with Kentrade to enhance the maritime single window by using some form of AI technology where we can actually coordinate the activities. We line up when the ship comes in, what are the things she plans to do. And then we have all the timing, everybody is on the same page. When somebody's service time changes, it may affect the next service provider. So all this can somehow be used, be using technology to help coordinate so that what we can achieve what we call just-in-time operations. So there's no wastage, no waiting times in between. I think, besides the maritime single window, because the maritime single window addresses the seaward side of activities. You know, when the ship comes in, you have the port call activities, the IMO foul conventions requirements. But on the landward side of the port operations, I think there is also a need for a port community system which will coordinate the movements of the trucks in and out of the gate, the loading and discharging of containers at the ship site. So I think moving forward, we will work with Kenya, Kentrade, first enhancing maritime single window, at the same time looking forward to, in partnership with Kentrade, to implement the port community system.
Great, thank you. As we mentioned, port community systems, obviously the Djibouti project highlighted by Warsama has been successful, but there must have been challenges on the way. Warsama first, anything that you think are challenges that others should be aware of when embarking on these kind of projects, and how did you overcome them? Oh, the mute button.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Yes, certainly there was a lot of challenges like everyone has had when implementing these type of systems, especially integrating all these different entities together. This is not something that has happened before in Djibouti. So in terms of any type of system-to-system integration between the entities, port community system was the first. So it was a new concept for our partners. So, but we've been able to move very fast, and we wanted also to start with the trade side of things by starting the integration with customs. But we've had a lot of difficulties with that, and as we were facing roadblocks after roadblocks, we focused on the maritime single window side first, and to finalize any integration with shipping agents, the ports and the port authority, or any other entities like health quarantine entities, to ease the documentation submission from the shipping agent side. So as we were, if we kind of face that roadblock, we're focusing on other things that were going to that had the potential to be moved along faster. And once we finalized the maritime single window, then we moved on to tracking. So as we had the port community system side, discharging time and loading times to track, and then we had the gate in, gate out, and then we started integrating the corridor, the road corridor, in terms of buying the pass and everything. And as we were doing this, the activities, the integration of the system itself was building more and more influence in Djibouti, and people were getting on board because they were able to see that the system was successful in integrating 2 or 3 different entities. Then you had more acceptance from the others. So we were kind of building on top of the certain implementation to get the others on board as well. And afterwards, we have noticed in the port community meetings, because even before the port community system, we used to have a sort of monthly port community meeting where we used to have in one table all the different stakeholders. So the shipping agents were requesting a lot of improvements from the ports. And we noticed the forwarders were requesting a lot of improvements from the shipping agents. So everyone wanted the like another entity to help him ease his job. So what we did is that we sat down with the shipping agents and we said, okay, guys, if we implement the improvements that you request from the ports, the improvement that you request from customs, would you be then more receptive to provide the necessary support to ease the job of the forwarders themselves in terms of manifest amendments? Because if there was any change in the bill of lading details, the forwarders then had to depend on the shipping agents to amend it from customs side. So since they have seen that we have been able to provide some facilitation to them, they were more receptive to then help us and provide more facilitation for the other stakeholders that depend on their services. So this is how we basically managed to get to this stage.
Great, thank you. And Solomon, from Crimson Logic's point of view then, how did you work on this project with the Djibouti Port Community Systems? And obviously there's the Vision Djibouti 2035 project. What do you see as the future of your partnership going forward?
Thank you, Beth. To answer your first question, yes, we did face quite a few challenges when we set out to implement the project, all very typical of a national community system like this. Varsama covered quite a bit of them. I think change management, he dwelled a lot on change management. Yes, that was one of the key challenges that we faced. So we had to work closely with Varsama and his team to sensitize all the stakeholders. So the key was we were trying to sit with them, explain to them how the system, how the implementation of the whole system is going to re-engineer the process, is going to improve the process, and in the end, how they are going to benefit. So we had to spend a lot of time and effort to get their buy-in. Once we got the buy-in, then I think things moved a bit more smoothly. So that was one of the key challenges. The other challenge we also had, which Varsama alluded to, was also the integration with the other stakeholder systems. Predominantly, it was the customs, where we had to integrate quite a few of the processes with the customs backend system. So we had challenges there, and again, we took a very progressive approach. We went for the quick wins first. We did the easier ones first, and then the more challenging ones. So that was our approach, and we also had integration challenges with the terminal operators. We also had to do it in a very phased manner. There were a few terminal operators, and they were using different systems. So we had to cater to each of the terminal operator. We provided them different ways to come and provide data and information into the system, or extract data from the system, right from like simple Excel uploads to user interface coming in, logging in and updating, and system host-to-host integration through EDI standards. Right.
Great. Thank you very much. Nainan, back to you. Obviously, we've heard like some of the challenges and some of the approaches that these guys made towards their projects. I think one of the things that kind of has cropped up is that change management, which you mentioned in your kind of opening remarks. What do you think is key then for anyone that's like in the audience, maybe thinking, right, we're starting to embark on this journey? What are the things that they should really be thinking about from a global perspective? And also, I just wanted to ask as well, what can some of the nations that you mentioned aren't reaching those FAO requirements and targets, what can they learn from the likes of, say, Singapore, but also from our friends here from Kenya and Djibouti?
Thank you, Beth. I think Osama walked us through a nice a process that they adopted. I could capture how he managed to get the influence, how he managed to influence the stakeholders. That is the key. You need to bring the community together, and fantastic examples on monthly meetings. You bring in the stakeholders, update them, make them aware of the benefits that they are getting, and then, as Solomon was mentioning, you get the buy-in from the community. Yes. So let me come to the tougher part. Tougher part, I think, if you ask any of them, is that change management, right? Many of these port authorities, if you look at the institutions, the people who are working they are not technology-oriented people, right? They are shipping people. They are frontline people engaged in processing shipping activities. Now you need a lot of institutional capacity building there to train them, to support them in understanding what are the kind of technologies, benefits, and solutions available. But before I go there, I would like to start with leadership. The most important thing to facilitate is the policy reform in areas of digitalization. It's not just a matter of technology, but more importantly, to facilitate that change, data collaboration, and also the political commitment. So I would put the increasing role of governments first. Formulating that digital strategy requires understanding the linkages between the stakeholder communities within the ecosystem and evaluate the platforms that could be used. So these are, as I mentioned, new areas of engagement from a government agency, and particularly in many developing countries, capacity strengthening in this area needs to be prioritized. So the World Bank IAPH report underlines the need for this human capital and institutional development. And any move towards increased digitization will require a high level of political commitment and establishment of an appropriate legal, regulatory, and policy framework at the national level. So, in addition to the human capital development, to commission, absorb, and implement the associated demands of stakeholders, overcoming this challenge will necessitate efforts and the processes to establish the framework at national level to manage the change. The framework is envisaged to encompass 3 levels, an interministerial committee, a steering committee, and a business process committee. All 3 key parties need to come together. The buy-in at the senior level, the leadership at the senior level at the ministerial committee, the steering committee who is able to build trust across the stakeholders, and then putting the actors together to get ahead with the business process automation and digitization. So these are key to make the change management. And the World Bank supports client countries in areas of institutional strengthening and capacity building as part of our engagements. And we provide advisory services to a number of countries that face disruptions of supply chain during the recent lockdowns. So these are the immediate way to make progress to the next level.
Excellent. Thank you very much. On that note, I'm going to just take a look at some of the audience questions that have come in. Amos and Osama, you've been really great at answering some of these, but I just wanted to expand on one of them. The question came from Pascal Olivier, who is one of our friends from the IAPH. He says, and this is to you, Amos, after 8 years of implementation, if you had to do it again from scratch, what would you do differently? And you've mentioned having more private sector involvement in the implementation agency and PPP. So can you just expand on that a little bit more? Because I think it's quite an interesting point on who you would have involved if you were to like start again.
Yeah, and just adding to what Minan has said, I think the implementation agency is critical in success of single window implementation, implementations of this nature. And I think we've seen different models in different countries. You find some of the implementing agencies are customs-led or embedded as part of customs reform. Some of them, like Kentrade, we were separated entirely. So a complete new entity, of course, coming in with challenges around culture and just building up, new startup challenges. But I think in my experience is whereas a lot of what Ninan has mentioned works, these steering agents, steering committees at national level, at median level. After a number of years, a lot of these steering committees fall out and the implementing agency is left on its own. Now, if this implementing agency is not properly structured and resourced, then you have challenges. Now, typically, and using my case, and I think my response to Pascal, Kentrade, we're under the National Treasury. So we're a full government agency. We do not charge for the use of the single window system. But that in itself is already a challenge because a lot of what we could have achieved, even beyond what we have achieved, is because of the limitations of, for example, budgets. Obviously, the Treasury has, after a while, once the project is up and running, then they start questioning whether they need to keep pumping resources to you, not understanding that what you have needs to be sustained. The models I've seen that work very well is where then you have government and private sector coming together. And we've seen those models in Mauritius, in Ghana, in quite a number of countries, where then you have a company that has shareholding for multiple players. But government remains because then government continues to be able to drive political goodwill. But then you have the private sector who comes in with a bit more commercial interest. Then that facilitates sustainability of these products. And then you're able then to deploy quite a significant part of the resources to R&D, and moving forward. So I think that was the basis of my response to Pascal. Eventually, the implementing agency is left on its own. And if not properly resourced, then it becomes a challenge.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that answer. Warsama, I don't know if you had anything to kind of add to that.
Yes. In terms of implementation strategy, because at the beginning we tried to learn a lot from other countries, from the International Port Community Association basically, and look at what all the different members were doing for the implementation. So we went to change management, letting people know about the system that we're going to implement and what is going to bring for them. At the same time, they have quickly noticed that it's going to take something away from them in terms of control. And if the final importer knows exactly what is going on, transparency. So the local logistics provider would not have the option to tell him whenever the process is delayed that still the port's fault or the customs fault. So they were quickly able to identify that. So then we managed to we came across some difficulties afterwards in some of the stakeholders' vested interests continue working like they used to. At the same time, you can only keep pushing, inform people, and whether you're using the correct implementation strategy, even if you're using the correct implementation strategy, you're still going to need time to let the concept take root in people's mind. So it still takes time for the project to mature, to become mature enough for people to come on board and to see the final success of basically user coming into the platform, and also to provide some clarifications in terms of charging, because the system itself has to be sustainable. For that, it has to have to get some fees from the final end users, and when you bring in PPPs, and like at the beginning we were exploring this idea, we found out that it's basically profit-oriented strategy, where they were planning to heavily charge the end user. So we discarded that idea, and we tried to go something in the middle. So a semi-private company owned 100% by the government, like DPCS. We are able to charge the final end user only if we're able to demonstrate the added value. We cannot charge for submission of regulatory documentation like manifest, file forms. All these regulatory documentation submission has to be free. So what we charge is tracking capabilities for the end user to track their own cargo. Electronic delivery order. You either have the choice to use the system or still use the manual, previous manual process. So this is how we managed to bring in some fees for the sustainability of the system itself. But you always need time. Even if you adopt the best strategy in the world, it's going to take time as well.
Excellent, thank you. So I've got a couple of questions for the Crimson Logic team as well. Fuxang, one thing that we kind of wanted to go over was what are the measures or the KPIs that port regulators can leverage to track the performance of their ports, and kind of what do you guys offer in terms of that point? Just find the unmute at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we've got you.
Okay, good. Okay, when we talk about KPIs, well, this is a very interesting and important topic for not only port regulators, but in fact in all industries. When I talk about KPI, I would always like to borrow the wisdom of management guru Peter Drucker, who was always quoted as having said, "You can't manage what you can't measure, and if you can't measure it, you can't improve it." So that's why setting KPIs is important, and also having the means to measure your performance. So I think when we have when the port regulator embarks on the digital journey, the first thing that happens is that all the paper documents, the paper information is now electronic, and they can be stored, and they can be used, analyzed, and create a lot of value out of it. So I think in terms of KPI, for port regulators, I think most of the time they look at maybe improving the port, the growth of the port in terms of the cargo container throughput and the performance of the port. So this is important KPI, and having a digital platform where all the information about the vessels, the cargo and container passing through the port are captured electronically. A lot of very useful reports can be generated. So this is one way where you can measure. First, you have your KPI, you set your target, your goal, and then you can generate reports from this the platform to know where you stand, and then you can look at what is the gap, and then devise strategies and action plan to close the gap. So that is from the regulator perspective. How do I grow my port? How do I improve performances? So there are a lot of, for example, there are ways that you look at how the port performs. From the regulator perspective, is that when the ship comes in, does it have to wait at the anchorage before it's given a berth to load and discharge cargo? So how many % of the ship coming in are given a berth upon arrival? How many % have to wait for 12 hours or 24 hours? I've been to ports that I see ships waiting for 24 hours before they come alongside. So this is one way to measure whether the terminals are actually, there's enough capacity, whether there's a berth congestion, and the statistics will show up. So that will be very useful. And if you have a high percentage of ships waiting for more than 24 hours, then you know that it may be time to expand your port. So we also, port regulators should also look at the KPIs from the customer's perspective. You know, of course, the shipping lines would be very concerned if my ship comes to your port, I have to wait for 24 hours. Another measurement would be the services that the ship gets when she's in your port. So even getting a pilot and tug in some ports I've seen, it can be the hassle. And the service time, if the ship requests for a pilot at 1500, but most of the time it turns up 2-3 hours late, it will affect a lot of downstream activities, especially for departure of a ship when it's finished operations. So so the service time of tugs and pilots, even service time of the service providers such as bunkers and water and ship chandlers, they may be private sectors, private businesses, but then it affects the overall performance of the port and the actually, I would say, the the image of how the port performs. Because if a ship comes to the port to get water and it has to wait for a long time before it gets that service. Another measurement is from the landward side. I think although the regulator may not be not so interested in the landward side, but actually they should, because again it gives a very poor impression of the port. If a truck that enters the gate to pick up a container needs to stay in the port before for 3 hours before it comes out of the out gate, or is it 30 minutes? So this truck turnaround time is important because it affects a local industry, because all the transporters mainly are from within the country. So when they truck your containers in and out, are they taking a long time before they get service? So these are some of the KPIs, and of course the regulators will also want to look at if there's a plan to zoom in into certain types of maybe cargo handling, or certain types of ships, for example, ro-ro ships. So I will all have set KPIs, and I will use statistics to measure how am I doing and what's the gap. How do I increase my ro-ro ships coming in? What must I do? And I need to devise strategies and all that. So just to recap is that first you set the KPI, and then you must have statistics to show up where you stand currently. Then you look at the gap and you devise strategies and action plans to close the gap.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Another thing I wanted to touch on, and I think it was a question that we did get from the audience as well, was the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think AI has been mentioned as well during our discussion. But Solomon, how is Crimson Logic able to leverage these technologies?
Thank you, Beth. Yes, I mean, today AI, machine learning, blockchain, they are all buzzwords. And yes, they have to various degrees being useful in not only improving the system, but also in improving the efficiency and so on. We at Crimson Logic, we are in the forefront of technology, and TFP, our platform, trade facilitation platform, is constantly improved and aligned to the latest technology. We have been extensively using AI and machine learning in the areas of risk management and data extraction. Within our TFP, we have the product called ARA, which is the Advanced Risk Analytics, which is totally based on AI and ML. It complements the traditional rules-based system, which typically customs or the government agencies use. This ARA is used to identify unknown risks in the supply chain. Risk related to security, related to under-declaration, valuation, or misclassification, or any other type of fraud can be detected through the ARA. So ARA uses some of the machine learning and AI models like predictive analytics, anomaly detection. We use text mining, natural language processing, and deep learning to identify such risks in the supply chain. So we take in all the data in the supply chain, ingest it, and run it through our engine to be able to predict such kind of risk. In addition to ARA, we have recently launched our latest offering, which is the Data TX. Okay, the Data TX offers the trading community the ability to scrap and extract data from scanned images and PDF documents. Typically in an import declaration or an import process, the importer or the clearing agent receives the documents from the supplier, from the country of where the goods are being originated. And they receive the documents in either images or in PDF format. So there's a lot of manual effort that is needed for these clearing agents or for these importers to read this data, to extract this data and input this data into national compliance systems or single windows. So many of them have full-time data entry operators doing this, or even the clearing agents charging a bomb on doing such services. So that is where Data TX comes in. It eases the process of data extraction and does it automatically. So traders or importers, clearing agents can leverage on this tool to help them in the productivity. I mean, their productivity. Our survey, we had done a survey sometime back, and our survey finds out that like a typical customs declaration with about 50 items can take anywhere between like 2 or 3 days, even 2 or 3 days to prepare the data itself. So this can be drastically reduced when you use technologies like Data TX, which is powered again by AI and machine learning. We are also in the space of blockchain. We have our platform called OTB, Open Trade Blockchain, which has been connected both in Singapore as well as in our overseas markets. One of the typical use case that we use for the blockchain is the certificate of origin, where the certificate of origin is exchanged from the importing country from the exporting country to the importing country, where the importing country needs to show the certificate of origin in order to qualify for any free trade agreements or in order to qualify any preferential tariff.
Great,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I think it's obviously something that everyone wants to talk about, the AI and machine learning, as well as the blockchain element of these kind of processes and especially these case studies. I'm going to just pick up one more audience question, and this one's for Nainan. From your perspective, what are the conditions that governments need to establish in order to attract private firms to help with the provision of single window services? So this kind of follows on from what Amos was talking about just earlier in our discussion.
Well, as I mentioned, to start with that facilitation of that, I would say, National Trade Facilitation Committee. So to bring in the private sector, first of all, you need to build that trust. So putting all these key actors together and hearing the needs of the private sector, what are the, how are you going to support them, facilitate the collaboration with the government? That is very key. I think some countries have taken steps in this regard. I know that Peru, the government of Peru, they came out with a directive to link systems. So when you link, for example, freight and goods transportation platform to a trading platform, you are seeing the collaboration of the private and the public sector. So the government needs to lead it, to come out with probably ministerial decrees, etc., to build that confidence and trust so that the private and government actors can work together.
Great, thank you very much. I think that's quite a good note to kind of start to end the discussion on, because we've talked about how important it is to collaborate and have that trust in order to develop the solutions that we've seen here today. What I'd like to ask from all our panelists is maybe to provide the audience with what they think the key takeaway should be and any future developments that you are embarking on. I know we touched on them. So kind of what's important for the audience after this session to take away, and what is next for you? I think I will start with, starting at random, but I'll start with Phúc Seng. So key takeaways from today's session from your point of view, and what you think is up next that's important to highlight.
Okay, maybe I would just hope that the message to the participants today is that if your port has not embarked on your digital transformation journey, today is the right day and the right time. So this is the first step, because as I mentioned before, it's going to be a long journey. So I think I hope through today's forum, it gives you some insight into what it entails to digitalize your port operations, how to embark on your digital transformation. Secondly, to those participants who are already on the journey, so I wish you the best to further enhance and to look at new ways of doing things always. And the digitalization is just an enabler. So as I always tell my customers and the ports that I visit, once you have that platform, the community system where your stakeholders are on board, the amount of or the services or functions that you can put on that platform is up to your imagination. So everything that, even a simple message sent across different stakeholders, can be digitalized. And this is how big data is being used, so people capture when you're on your mobile, how long do you stay on the screen, which are the advertisements that you always look at, what are the type of news. So every time when you switch on your mobile, all these categories of news and advertisements will pop up. So you must be wondering, how does the telco know that I like this kind of news? So, but this is all big data. Somebody behind is collecting this and analyzing the users, getting to know the customers. So when you embark on this digital journey, I think important thing is to know your customers. So being a regulator, be it regulator or terminal operators, know your customers. So know what their needs are and know what they want, and put all these needs into as part of your digital transformation plan.
Thank you very much. Next, Amos, same kind of closing remarks from yourself, and thank you once again for an excellent presentation at the beginning of this session.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Beth. I think for those who are about to start on this journey, you know, the challenges are only at the onset, at the beginning. So they should not get scared of starting the journey. Yes, there'll be resistance. What they need to do is prepare for that resistance. Start at the top, put in place the necessary structures in terms of whether it's political goodwill from government, make sure the principals are all aware. Whenever you're embarking on a new product, make sure all the CEOs, the principals are put in one room and debriefed on what you want to do. Even as you start then going to request them to appoint champions for your project, and sustain that change process all through the project, even post the project. You know, you have to spend on change management. There's no two way about it. You know, whether it's all those sensitization meetings, all the workshops, you know, the training, facilitation, make sure you have the resources actually to spend as the implementing agency. We went even to an extra mile of buying computers and setting up Wi-Fi in different government offices. So make sure you're well resourced and go out of your way to make sure that this works. Now, you will eventually realize that people start coming to you. Now we're at a point as Kentrade where we no longer follow government agencies. We're not part of the process. They actually come to look for us so that we can then onboard them onto the platform. So the challenge is initially, but you know, over the course of the project, then once the benefit starts coming up, then they will be seen. So, but make sure you have a well-structured implementing agency and be very aggressive about automation. Own the process yourself as an implementing agency and believe in that change, and you will then be able to influence the rest of the stakeholders. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you very much, Amos. And Wasama as well, over to you for some closing remarks. And again, thank you very much for your insightful presentation this morning. Well, this morning, this afternoon, this evening, depending on where you are.
Thank you very much, Beth. Thank you also for the panelists. It was very insightful, and I've managed to learn, to take away some lessons for myself as well. So if I could add something, it will be to stress or to emphasize what Hokseng said at the end: know your customers, because at the root of all this is problem solving, and digitalization should not be for the sake of digitalization. I would say we should focus on problems that we are providing, trying to provide a solution for, and look at the whole thing from a problem-solving perspective. And we're all going to find that there is always that particular problem that will make the stakeholders say yes to digitalization, and basically that's it for my side.
Thank you so much. Nainam, from your perspective, I think it's been really useful to have that kind of overview from the World Bank and from your findings as well. It's been a key part of the discussion, as kind of highlighting the things that need to be done. So just like key takeaways, what do you think people should be kind of thinking about as they leave this session today?
Thank you. I think well said already by Amos, Barsama, and Futseng. I would probably use 2 points. First, an integrated approach. It cannot be an isolated decision. It has to be an integrated approach by the government agencies, the key stakeholders, the main customers, etc. And getting that going, as demonstrated in the presentations by Amos and Warsama, the pains that they have taken, the journey. So think about the integrated approach right from the start. Institutions, important. The government leadership is important. And then the technology providers and the users. My second point would be, don't let the crisis go to waste. You can see the major developments in digitalization over the last 1.5 years. So it takes a crisis to make a leapfrog, in the progress. And also, for example, not just the pandemic, let's look at even the situation in Beirut port. An explosion in the port is now panning out to be a very clear, well thought out strategy to rebuild the country using technology, etc. So never let go to waste the crisis, and an integrated approach. Thank you. Excellent presentations, and thank you to be here on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I can see some shaking of heads and nodding in agreement to not let a crisis go to waste. So that's a really excellent point to make. Finally, from our second Crimson Logic partner, Solomon, what would you say to our audience before we close out this excellent session today?
Thank you, Bert. I think the digitization was mentioned earlier. It is if you have not yet started on this journey, I think you should have started yesterday, especially with this situation with COVID and all this, and with most of your employees working from home. You would expect to offer your services or get your employees to work from home through a digitized platform, right? I hope this session has also shared some good experiences, which some of our participants can take away and use in their own digitization journey. I really thank the presenters for the excellent presentation, Amos and Warsama, all the panelists, and you, Bert, as well. It was a very lively and insightful presentation, and there was a lot of takeaway for me personally to improve my product, to improve how to apply some of these, to improve our own processes and our own product development activities. I would also like to thank all the participants, all those who, shout outs to all those who have asked questions and kept the at least the forum quite lively. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much for that, Solomon. And yeah, just to add my thanks on, as we kind of come to a close to this first Global Maritime Forum on digital transformation of maritime and ports, I would like to once again thank all our speakers for joining us today, for the really insightful discussion, for answering the questions via the questions tab as well. I know I say that quite a lot during these things, but thank you for providing your answers. And for any of the questions that we didn't get to from the audience, we will be able to share them with our speakers so they can answer if they do have time in the future. But yes, Amos and Warsama, again, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you,
and thank you very much to Crimson Logic for sponsoring this session today and kind of bringing everyone together. I think it's been an absolutely fantastic session with such a, as Solomon said, such a lively chat and debate. So thank you again. To our audience members, thank you so much for joining us. We love having you here at these PTI events, and we hope to welcome you back very soon. As I've mentioned in the chat a couple of times, this session will be on demand as of tomorrow, so you'll be able to catch up or share with your colleagues anything that was missed. But from everyone here at Port Technology and from all our speakers and panelists, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next PTI event. Goodbye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Moving goods from one point of the world to another requires interaction with and reliance on both commercial and government stakeholders. Goods go through a 5-step journey. Throughout this process, goods are handled by multiple commercial parties who provide logistics, compliance, and financing services to ensure they reach destinations without a hitch. This is where GETS comes in, to power global trade connectivity, making it more accessible, predictable, and easier to fulfill. On the other end of the spectrum, government agencies are involved in trade facilitation, regulatory enforcement, and oversight at both the origin and destination borders. This is where our trade facilitation platform takes center stage, empowering governments with a full range of capabilities to manage these processes. The interests and priorities between governments and businesses in the trade space are starting to converge in 3 key areas. Control. To ensure governance and manage risk, there's a need for increased visibility. Businesses which share relevant information with governments go through less red tape, resulting in faster clearances and lower cross-border tariffs. Connectivity. For trade ecosystem. This entails collaboration with multiple stakeholders which enable the creation of more effective trade processes. Competitiveness. With enhancements in control and connectivity, productivity and efficiency is increased. Businesses become more profitable, and governments become more attractive partners, giving them a competitive edge in the global trade ecosystem. As the interests, priorities, and needs of governments and businesses converge, the concept of a synergistic total trade proposition is a compelling one. Together as a group, Crimson Logic and GETS bring to you the Total Trade Platform.